Welcome back to Kidzpedia. In the previous part, we saw how the Marathas expanded their empire and became one of the most powerful forces in India. In this part, we will begin with the Marathas' maritime supremacy, then we will explore their judicial system, trade networks, cultural revival, inspiring leaders like Tarabai and Ahilyabai Holkar, the rich cultural heritage of Thanjavur, and finally, the lasting legacy of the Marathas. So, let's continue Chapter 3, The Rise of the Marathas, Part 3. Maritime Supremacy. As we saw, Chhatrapati Shivaji created a navy to secure the west coast. In the 18th century, Kanhoji Angre guided the Marathas to victory in many naval battles, thanks to a clever use of geography and battle tactics, despite the Maratha ships not being as technologically advanced as the European ones. So till now, we have seen how the Marathas became powerful on land, but they also knew that controlling the sea was just as important. When Chhatrapati Shivaji built the Maratha Navy, his main aim was to protect the western coast of India. A strong navy could stop enemy ships, protect ports, and keep trade routes safe. In the 18th century, this naval strength became even greater under Kanhoji Angre. He was one of the most successful naval commanders of the Marathas. The interesting part is that Maratha ships were not as modern or technologically advanced as European ships. The Europeans had bigger ships and better weapons. So, how did Kanhoji Angre still win many naval battles? Instead of depending only on powerful ships, he used geography wisely. He knew the Konkan coastline, narrow sea routes, islands, and forts extremely well. He also planned smart battle tactics, choosing the right place and right time to attack. This allowed the Marathas to suppress their enemies and win many naval battles even against stronger European fleets. At the time, the main strength of Europeans in India was their navies. They forced Indians to purchase their naval trade passes, cartas in Portuguese, at a price. Any ship without a pass was confiscated. The Marathas challenged this practice and started demanding passes from the Europeans themselves, who showed their frustration by labeling Kanhoji Angre a pirate. So, during that time, the greatest strength of the European powers in India was their navies. Because they controlled the seas, they also tried to control sea trade. The Europeans followed a system called the Cartaz. A Cartaz was a naval trade pass. Any Indian ship that wanted to sail and trade had to buy this pass from the Europeans. But what if a ship didn't have a Cartaz? The Europeans would confiscate this ship. In other words, they would seize it and take control of it. This allowed them to dominate sea trade and force Indian traders to obey their rules. The Marathas strongly opposed this system. They believed that Europeans had no right to control Indian waters or force Indian traders to buy passes. So, instead of accepting European authority, they started demanding that European ships also obtain passes from the Marathas if they wanted to sail in waters controlled by them. This made the Europeans very angry. Unable to accept the Marathas' challenge, they called Kanhoji Angre a pirate. But Kanhoji Angre was not a pirate. He was protecting Maratha waters and challenging European control over sea trade. The Europeans used the word pirate because he refused to accept their dominance. Figure 3.16. In this picture, Maratha ships attacking English ships. Notice the difference between the two fleets. The English ships are much larger and taller. They carried heavier cannons and had more advanced technology. The Maratha ships are much smaller and faster. At first, it may seem impossible for these small ships to fight such huge vessels. So, how did the Marathas succeed? Instead of fighting in the open sea, Kanhoji Angre used the west coast to his advantage. He knew the narrow coastal waters, islands, and sea forts very well. His smaller ships could move quickly, surround the larger English ships, and launch surprise attacks before escaping. This is why, even though the Europeans had better technology, the Marathas won many naval battles through smart planning, speed, and excellent knowledge of the coastline. Don't miss out. In 1665, 4 ships from Chhatrapati Shivaji's fleet reached Muscat, the capital of Oman. The ruler there captured them and arrested the men on board. He also prepared a few ships to attack Chhatrapati Shivaji's coastal possessions. But on hearing that Chhatrapati Shivaji's navy contained more than 100 ships, he retreated inside the harbour with his ships. So, the strength of Chhatrapati Shivaji's navy was so well known that even foreign rulers were cautious of it. In 1665, 4 Maratha ships reached Muscat, the capital of Oman. The ruler of Muscat captured the ships and arrested the sailors on board. After this, he even prepared a few ships to attack Shivaji's coastal territories. But then he received important information that Shivaji's navy had more than 100 ships. Realizing the Marathas had a much stronger naval force than he had expected, he decided not to attack. Instead, he withdrew his ships and stayed inside the harbour. In other words, he chose to avoid a naval battle with the Marathas. This incident shows that Shivaji's navy had earned a strong reputation. Its strength alone was enough to discourage enemies from attacking. Judicial system. The Marathas had an efficient judicial system remarkable for its moderation in using capital punishment, the death penalty. The Panchayat, not to be confused with the current day Panchayat, a governmental body, was a local gathering of officials and prominent men and the main body that delivered justice. An appeal could be made to a Maratha chief in case of an unsatisfactory verdict. Additionally, in various prominent towns such as Pune, Indore, etc., the Kotwal or the police was also deployed to ensure law and order within the city. So, a strong empire does not depend only on a powerful army, it also needs a good justice system to maintain peace and order. The Marathas had an efficient judicial system, which means cases were handled in an organized and effective way. One special feature of their system was that they rarely used capital punishment or the death penalty. In other words, they preferred to settle disputes fairly instead of giving the harshest punishment. At the local level, justice was mainly delivered by the Panchayat. But remember, this Panchayat was different from today's Panchayat, which is a local government body. The Maratha Panchayat was a group of local officials and respected people who listened to disputes, discussed them, and gave a judgment. What if someone was not satisfied with the decision? They could appeal to a Maratha chief who would review the case and give the final decision. The Marathas also took care of law and order in important cities like Pune and Indore. For this, they appointed a Kotwal who was the head of the city's police. His duty was to maintain peace, prevent crimes, and ensure that the city remained safe. Next is trade networks. Chhatrapati Shivaji encouraged trade and actively participated in maritime foreign trade himself. He and his officials had their own ships, which they regularly sent to ports as far away as Mocha in Yemen, Muscat in Oman, and Malacca in Malaysia. Some of these ships carried cargo like gold, textiles, etc. So, the Marathas did not use their navy only for wars. They also understood that trade was important for the kingdom's wealth and prosperity. That is why Chhatrapati Shivaji encouraged trade. In fact, he personally took part in maritime foreign trade. Maritime trade means trade carried out through sea routes. Shivaji and his officials owned ships of their own. These ships regularly sailed to faraway ports in different countries. Some important ports they traded were Mocha in Yemen, Muscat in Oman, and Malacca in Malaysia. This shows that the Marathas were connected with international trade networks across the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean. These ships carried valuable goods such as gold and textiles to different foreign ports. So, the Maratha Navy had two important roles. It protected the western coast and sea trade, and it also helped expand trade with other countries, bringing wealth to the Maratha state. Roads were constructed and maintained in places such as Odisha in the 18th century. A network of ferries was maintained for riverine transport. Bridges were built over rivers and small streams. So, the Marathas knew that a strong kingdom needed good transport facilities. Roads were important not only for people and traders but also for moving soldiers and goods quickly. That is why they constructed new roads and regularly maintained them so that travel and trade could continue smoothly. In some regions, especially Odisha during the 18th century, rivers were an important means of transport. To make traveling across rivers easily, the Marathas maintained a network of ferries. A ferry is a boat used to carry people, animals, and goods across the river. Along with ferries, they also built bridges over rivers and small streams. These bridges made travel safer and faster, especially during the rainy season when crossing rivers became difficult. All these improvements, roads, ferries, and bridges, helped people travel easily, supported trade, and kept different parts of the Maratha Empire well connected. Next is cultural revival. The Marathas contributed substantially to India's cultural developments. Chhatrapati Shivaji's vision of Swarajya is evident in his seal, which carried a Sanskrit inscription, a notable departure from the prevalent Persian seals. This seal, that is authority of Chhatrapati Shivaji, the son of Shaji, waxing like the new moon, revered by the world, reigns for the welfare of the people. So, the Marathas did not strengthen only their army and administration, they also made an important contribution to India's culture. One of the best examples of this is Chhatrapati Shivaji's vision of Swarajya. Swarajya means self-rule, a kingdom governed by its own people for the welfare of its people. This idea can be clearly seen in Shivaji's royal seal. At that time, most rulers used Persian on their official seals because Persian was the language commonly used in administration. But Shivaji made a different choice. Instead of Persian, he used a Sanskrit inscription on his seal. This was a notable departure from the existing practice, and it reflected his vision of Swarajya and his respect for India's own cultural traditions. And the inscription on the seal says, "This seal of Chhatrapati Shivaji, the son of Shaji, grows like the new moon. It is respected by the world and rules for the welfare of the people." The comparison with the new moon means that Shivaji's power and reputation would continue to grow, just as the new moon gradually becomes full. The most important message in the inscription is that the ruler should govern for the welfare of the people, not just for personal power. Chhatrapati Shivaji also commissioned a treatise called Rājya-Vyavahāra-Koṣha with the aim of promoting Marathi language. It provided Sanskrit equivalents for the prevalent Persian words used in diplomatic exchanges, as a result of which the percentage of foreign loanwords in Maratha diplomacy decreased considerably. Chhatrapati Shivaji was a devout Hindu who respected other religions while upholding his own. His saffron-colored flag was adopted by all Marathas. He rebuilt desecrated temples, promoted Sanskrit and Marathi literature, religious institutions, and traditional arts. So, Chhatrapati Shivaji believed that the kingdom should not only become strong only through its army, it should also protect its own language and culture. With this idea, he got a special book prepared called the Rājya-Vyavahāra-Koṣha. Why was this book needed? At that time, many Persian words were commonly used in official letters and diplomatic communication because Persian had been the main administrative language for a long time. The Rājya-Vyavahāra-Koṣha provided Sanskrit equivalents for these Persian words, and this encouraged officials to use Indian languages instead of foreign words in government work. As a result, the use of foreign loanwords in Maratha diplomacy decreased considerably. Shivaji was also a deep religious Hindu, but he respected people of other religions while following his own faith. Another important symbol of the Marathas was the saffron-colored flag. It became the common flag of all the Marathas. Shivaji also worked to protect and revive India's cultural heritage. He rebuilt temples that had been desecrated, encouraged the growth of Sanskrit and Marathi literature, and supported religious institutions and also promoted traditional arts. All these efforts helped preserve and strengthen the cultural identity of the Maratha kingdom. But perhaps he contributed most to the revival of ancient Indian culture and values by giving people a demonstration that mighty kingdoms and empires could be defeated and the Marathas could maintain, expand and administer an empire of their own. So all these achievements were important, but Shivaji's greatest contribution was something even bigger. He gave people confidence. At that time, many believed that powerful kingdoms and empires could never be defeated, but Shivaji proved that this was not true. He showed that with good leadership, courage and determination, even mighty empires could be challenged and defeated. The Marathas did not stop there. They built a strong kingdom of their own, expanded it into a large empire and most importantly, successfully administered it. In other words, they proved that Indians were not only capable of winning battles, but also of governing a vast and successful empire. This inspired people and played an important role in the revival of ancient Indian culture and values. The mighty Maratha women. Tarabai was a fearless Maratha warrior queen who ruled in the early 18th century after the death of her husband Raja Ram. Realizing that with the presence of Aurangzeb and the Mughal army in the Deccan, North India was unprotected, she organized large Maratha armies and sent them to invade Mughal territories in the north. In that sense, she was the architect of the northward Maratha expansion. Her sense of military strategy and her tenacity outsmarted the Mughal Empire and preserved Maratha independence during a critical period. So, the Maratha Empire was strengthened not only by the brave kings and generals but also by courageous women. One of the greatest among them was Tarabai. After the death of her husband Raja Ram, Tarabai took charge of the Maratha kingdom in the early 18th century. At that time, Aurangzeb and the Mughal army were busy fighting in the Deccan. Tarabai understood something very important. If the Mughal emperor and his army were occupied in the south, then North India would be less protected. She used this opportunity wisely. Instead of waiting for the Mughals to attack, she organized large Maratha armies and sent them into the Mughal territories in the North India. This was a smart military strategy because it put pressure on the Mughal Empire from another direction. That is why Tarabai is called the architect of the northward Maratha expansion. Here, architect does not mean someone who designs buildings. It means the person who planned and made something possible. Tarabai was also known for her excellent military strategy and tenacity. Tenacity means determination and the courage to keep fighting without giving up, even during difficult times. Because of her intelligence, planning and determination, she outsmarted the Mughal Empire and protected the independence of the Marathas during one of the most challenging periods in their history. Ahilyabai Holkar was a scion of the Holkar dynasty, one of the chief families instrumental for the Maratha expansion in North India. During the 18th century, this dynasty ruled a kingdom of considerable extent in central India, around present-day Indore. Even after losing her husband and son, she bravely governed the state for 30 years, administering it wisely while caring for the common people. Ahilyabai was a devout person who built and restored hundreds of temples, ghats, wells and roads throughout India from Kedarnath in the north to Rameshwaram in the south. So, another remarkable woman in Maratha history was Ahilyabai Holkar. She belonged to the Holkar dynasty, one of the important Maratha families that played a major role in the Maratha expansion into North India. During the 18th century, the Holkars ruled a large kingdom in central India with its center around present-day Indore. Ahilyabai's life was full of personal tragedies. She lost both her husband and her son, but instead of giving up, She took the responsibility of ruling the kingdom. She governed the state for 30 years. During her rule, she became known as a wise and capable administrator. At the same time, she always cared for the welfare of the common people. Ahilyabai was also a deeply religious person. She built and restored hundreds of temples across India. But her work was not limited to temples alone. She also constructed ghats, wells, and roads, making travel easier and providing important public facilities for people. Her contributions reached almost the entire length of India, from Kedarnath in the north to Rameshwaram in the south. This shows that her efforts were not confined to her own kingdom. She worked for the preservation of India's cultural and religious heritage across the country. Most famously, she rebuilt the Kashi Vishwanath temple in Varanasi that had been destroyed by Aurangzeb, and the Somnath temple in Gujarat that had been destroyed by Mahmud of Ghazni. Ahilyabai Holkar is also credited with promoting the Maheshwar weaving industry in Madhya Pradesh, revitalizing traditional handloom crafts that continue to thrive today. So, Ahilyabai Holkar is remembered not only for ruling her kingdom well, but also for protecting India's cultural and religious heritage. One of her most famous achievements was the rebuilding of the Kashi Vishwanath temple in Varanasi. This temple had been destroyed during the reign of Aurangzeb, and Ahilyabai had it rebuilt. She also rebuilt the Somnath temple in Gujarat. This temple had been destroyed much earlier by Mahmud of Ghazni. By rebuilding these important temples, Ahilyabai helped restore places of great religious and cultural importance. Her contribution was not limited to temples. She also encouraged the Maheshwar weaving industry in present-day Madhya Pradesh. The weaving industry means the production of cloth using handlooms. By supporting the weavers, she helped revive traditional handloom crafts that had declined. The remarkable part is that this weaving tradition still continues and is famous even today. So, Ahilyabai contributed both to preserving India's cultural heritage and supporting traditional industries that provided livelihoods to people. Figure 3.19. This is not a painting from her lifetime. It is a postage stamp issued by the Government of India to honor Ahilyabai Holkar. When a person appears on a postage stamp, it means the country is recognizing and remembering their important contribution to history. Ahilyabai earned this honor because she was not only a successful ruler but also a caring administrator. Don't miss out. The Moḍī Script, a cursive form of Devanagari, was the main script used by Marathas for their correspondence. So, the Marathas did not use only Devanagari for writing. For their official correspondence, they mainly used a script called the Moḍī Script. Here, correspondence means official letters, records, and communication between government officials. The Moḍī Script was a cursive form of Devanagari. Cursive means the letters were written in a flowing, connected style, making writing faster and easier. This was especially useful for officials who had to prepare many documents and letters every day. So, while the language used was often Marathi, the script commonly used for administrative work was the Moḍī Script. Figure 3.20. This is a sample of Chhatrapati Shahu Maharaj's handwriting written in the Moḍī Script. At first glance, the letters may look very different from the Devanagari script that we read today. This is because the Moḍī Script was written in a flowing, connected style. This allowed officials to write quickly, making it very useful for day-to-day administration. The Marathas used this script for official correspondence, and this figure gives us a real example of how official documents were written during the Maratha period. Chhatrapati Shivaji's example continued to inspire his successors. For instance, the Bhosles of Nagpur emerged as the enthusiastic supporters of local culture and tradition. And the worship of Lord Jagannath at Puri in Odisha, which was often interrupted during the Mughal rule, was revived with support of the Marathas. But perhaps the most impressive contribution came from a few remarkable Maratha women. Let us hear about two of them. See page 77. So the work started by Chhatrapati Shivaji did not end with him. His successors also continued to protect and promote India's culture and traditions. For example, the Bhosles of Nagpur, one of the important Maratha ruling families, became strong supporters of local culture and traditions. Their efforts reached even places outside their own kingdom. In Puri, Odisha, the worship of Lord Jagannath had often been interrupted during the Mughal period. With the support of the Marathas, this worship was revived, allowing the religious traditions to continue once again. The Marathas made many such contributions to India's cultural revival. Among them were two extraordinary women, Tarabai and Ahilyabai Holkar. Through their courage, leadership, and service, they left a lasting mark on Maratha history. In focus, Thanjavur. Let us turn southward to witness another example of cultural contribution. Ikoji, the half-brother of Chhatrapati Shivaji, conquered the Thanjavur region in present-day Tamil Nadu in the late 17th century, marking the beginning of Maratha rule in the area. The Thanjavur Marathas especially helped create a syncretic culture that was rich and full of innovation. They were great patrons of the arts, and many of the rulers themselves were poets and dramatists. So now let's move from Western India to Southern India and see another example of the Marathas' contribution to Indian culture. The story begins with Ikoji, who was the half-brother of Chhatrapati Shivaji. In the late 17th century, Ikoji conquered the Thanjavur region in present-day Tamil Nadu. This marked the beginning of Maratha rule in Thanjavur. The Thanjavur Marathas were remembered especially for their contribution to culture. They helped create a syncretic culture. Syncretic culture means a culture that develops by bringing together ideas, traditions, languages, and customs from different communities, creating something new while respecting all of them. The rulers of Thanjavur also became great patrons of the arts. The patron of the arts is a person who supports artists, musicians, writers, dancers, and scholars, helping art and culture to flourish. In fact, many of the Maratha rulers themselves were poets and dramatists. This means they were not just rulers, they also wrote poems and plays, showing their deep interest in literature and the arts. Figure 3.21, a traditional Thanjavur style painting featuring delicate gold foil work that lends it a rich, radiant appearance. This style flourished under the patronage of the Marathas. So this is a traditional Thanjavur painting, an art style that became famous during the rule of the Thanjavur Marathas. The first thing you will notice is the bright golden decoration. These paintings were made using delicate gold foil, which gave them a rich, shining and royal appearance. Most Thanjavur paintings depict Hindu gods, goddesses and scenes from Indian epics, showing the deep connection between art and culture. The reason this art flourished was that the Maratha rulers of Thanjavur strongly supported artists. Because of this royal support, the Thanjavur painting style became one of the most famous traditional art forms of India, and it continues to be admired even today. Let's explore. Have you heard of the dance form Bharatanatyam? Did you know that this dance form has a deep connection with the Marathas? Can you find out what this connection was? So now here is an interesting question for you. Have you heard of Bharatanatyam? It is one of the oldest and most famous classical dance forms of India. Did you know that this dance form has a deep connection with the Marathas? And can you find out what this connection was? So what is the connection? When the Marathas ruled Thanjavur, they gave great importance to music, dance, literature and other arts. They encouraged artists and provided them with support and protection. Because of this encouragement, Bharatanatyam was preserved, developed further and became more organized. The famous Thanjavur quartet, who arranged Bharatanatyam into its present classical form, worked under the patronage of the Thanjavur Maratha rulers. So, the connection is not that the Marathas invented Bharatanatyam. The connection is that they supported, preserved and helped develop Bharatanatyam into the form we know today. Of all the Thanjavur Maratha rulers, the contributions of Serfoji II are the most notable. He was well versed in many Indian and European languages and wrote a Marathi play named Devendra Kuravanji, where he describes world geography in detail as was known at the time. Serfoji patronized many talented musicians, and it was during his time that modern Carnatic music took shape, as did the early stages of the famous classical dance form of Bharatanatyam. So, among all the Thanjavur Maratha rulers, Serfoji II is remembered as the most outstanding for his contributions to education, literature, music and culture. He was a highly educated ruler who knew many Indian and European languages. Serfoji II was not just a king, he was also a writer. He wrote a Marathi play called Devendra Kuravanji. What makes this play special is that it describes the geography of the world as people understood it during that period. This shows that Serfoji was interested not only in literature but also in knowledge about the world. Serfoji II also gave great encouragement to musicians and artists. He invited and supported many talented musicians, creating an environment where music could develop and flourish. It was during his reign that modern Carnatic music began to take shape. At the same time, the early stages of Bharatanatyam as a classical dance form also developed under his patronage. This shows that Serfoji II made an important contribution to both music and dance, leaving a lasting impact on Indian culture. Serfoji was quite interested in medicine and established the Dhanvantri Mahal, a center of medicine that offered free treatment of diseases using both Indian and Western medicine. He also started a printing press, the first such example in India by a native ruler. He got the history of the Bhosle family inscribed on the walls of the Brihadishvara temple at Tanjavur, which is one of the largest single inscriptions in India, a record for posterity. So, Serfoji II's interests were not limited to literature, music and dance. He also worked for the health and education of the people. He established the Dhanvantri Mahal, which was a center of medicine. People could receive free treatment there. One special feature of this center was that it used both Indian and Western systems of medicine. This shows that Serfoji believed in learning from different medical traditions to provide better healthcare. Serfoji II also made an important contribution to education and the spread of knowledge. He started a printing press, becoming the first native Indian ruler to establish one. A printing press made it possible to produce books and other written materials more easily, helping knowledge reach more people. He also wanted future generations to remember the history of his family. So, he had the history of the Bhosle family engraved on the walls of the Brihadishvara temple in Tanjavur. This inscription is one of the largest single inscriptions in India. It was created for posterity, which means to preserve this history for future generations. So, Serfoji II made important contributions in medicine, education, printing and the preservation of history. The cultural environment of Tanjavur was multilingual with a mix of many influences. The local Tamil culture, the Telugu culture of the former rulers and the current rulers' Marathi culture interacted with each other freely. The culture of Tanjavur was multilingual, which means people used and respected more than one language. Why was this so? Because Tanjavur was influenced by different rulers over time. The local people spoke Tamil, so Tamil culture remained strong. Before the Marathas came to power, the region had been ruled by Telugu rulers, so Telugu culture also had a strong influence. Later, when the Marathas ruled Tanjavur, they brought their own Marathi language and culture. So, instead of one culture replacing another, all three cultures existed together. The Tamil, Telugu and Marathi cultures interacted freely, influencing one another in language, literature, music, art and traditions. This created a rich and diverse cultural environment, making Thanjavur an important center of culture and learning. The Maratha Legacy. The Maratha rule challenged Mughal dominance and established the largest Indian empire before the British took over the subcontinent. controlling much of central and northern India. They set up a new way of governing with an efficient administration and also revived the local Hindu traditions without religious discrimination. Their brave fight against oppressive rule, foreign power was driven by the fiery ideal of Swarajya. Later, it inspired many Indians to believe they could govern themselves, planting the early seeds for India's freedom movement. So now let's look at the lasting impact of the Marathas on Indian history. The Marathas were the first major Indian power to successfully challenge the dominance of the Mughal Empire. As they became stronger, they built the largest Indian empire before the British came to rule the Indian subcontinent. Their empire spread across much of central and northern India, showing their military strength and effective leadership. But their achievement was not limited to expanding their empire. They also established an efficient system of administration which helped them govern such a vast territory successfully. At the same time, they worked to revive local Hindu traditions. However, this did not mean discrimination against other religions. The Marathas respected people of different faiths while preserving and promoting their own cultural traditions. Another important feature of the Marathas was their struggle against oppressive rule and foreign domination. The struggle was inspired by the ideal of Swarajya, which means self-rule, the belief that people should govern themselves instead of living under foreign control. Although the Maratha Empire later declined, the idea of Swarajya did not disappear. It continued to inspire future generations. Many Indians began to believe that they too could govern themselves, and this idea later became one of the early inspirations for India's freedom movement. Before we move on, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj founded the Maratha kingdom in the 17th century. Its decades-long resistance to Mughal power and the experience gained from this helped in its pan-Indian expansion in the 18th century. So, let's quickly connect everything we have learned about the Marathas. The Maratha kingdom was founded by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj in the 17th century. From the very beginning, the Marathas had to fight against the powerful Mughal Empire. Although these wars were difficult, they gave the Marathas valuable experience in warfare, administration, and leadership. This experience later became one of their greatest strengths. So, when the Mughal Empire started becoming weaker in the 18th century, the Marathas were well prepared. They used the experience gained from their long struggle to expand their power across India. As a result, the Marathas built a pan-Indian empire, spreading their influence over large parts of central and northern India. So, the Maratha success in the 18th century was not sudden. It was the result of the strong foundation laid by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj and the experience gained through years of resisting Mughal rule. The British captured India effectively from the Marathas more than from any other Indian power. So, when the British East India Company wanted to control India, it had to defeat the strongest Indian powers. Among all of them, the Marathas were their biggest challenge, and the British fought several wars against the Marathas, known as the Anglo-Maratha Wars. Only after defeating the Marathas were the British able to bring most of India under their control. That is why we say that the British captured India effectively from the Marathas more than from any other Indian power. In other words, the Marathas were the last major Indian power standing in the way of British rule. Their defeat allowed the British to establish their dominance over most of the Indian subcontinent. Forts were the core of Maratha state. The Marathas controlled hundreds of forts, thus strategically strengthening their control over the region. So, one of the greatest strengths of the Maratha Empire was its network of forts. The Marathas believed that forts were the core of the state. Why were forts so important? A fort was not just a place for soldiers to stay. It acted as a military base, a safe place during enemy attacks, and a center for administration and storing supplies. The Marathas controlled hundreds of forts across their kingdom. These forts were built at important strategic locations such as hilltops, mountain passes, and coastal areas. Because these forts were spread across different regions, the Marathas could protect their territory, defend against enemies, and keep control over their empire more effectively. So, the large network of forts gave the Marathas a strong strategic advantage and helped them maintain their rule. Their formidable navy resisted European naval supremacy for quite some time despite lack of access to the latest technology of the time. So we learned that the Marathas were powerful not only on land but also at sea. They built a strong navy that was able to challenge the powerful European navies for a long time. At that time, the Europeans had the most advanced ships and weapons. The Marathas did not have access to the latest naval technology. Their ships were generally less advanced than the European ones. Even so, they did not give up. With the help of skilled commanders like Kanhoji Angre, excellent knowledge of the west coast and smart battle strategies, the Marathas successfully resisted European naval supremacy for many years. This shows that good leadership, strategy and courage can sometimes overcome a lack of advanced technology. The Marathas inspired a new cultural confidence amongst Indians in various regions, thus contributing to the cultural revival and innovation. So, the Marathas did more than build a powerful empire. They gave people in different parts of India a new sense of confidence in their own culture. For a long time, many local traditions, languages and art forms had received less importance. The Marathas encouraged people to value and preserve their own culture and traditions. They supported regional languages, literature, temples, music, dance and traditional arts in different parts of the country. Because of this encouragement, people felt proud of their own cultural heritage. This led to a cultural revival where many old traditions were restored and preserved. At the same time, new ideas, new art forms and new literary works also developed. This is what the chapter means by innovation. Along with preserving the old, the Marathas also encouraged the creation of something new. So with this, we have completed the part 3 of the chapter, The Rise of the Marathas. I hope you found it easy to understand. If you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching. We will see you again in our next video. Bye-bye.